Great. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you very much for joining us in this, which is our third talk from our series Mid-Century Musings, which is all in association with the Mid-Century Modern exhibition currently at Dovecot Studios. We plan to do more of these talks. They've been very popular throughout October, so do keep an eye on social media as we announce them. And of course, if you're in Edinburgh, we would love, and you can travel safely, we would love to see you here in the building to see the exhibition in person. We also have tomorrow, I'm just going to see if I can move the slides, a full-length talk with guest curator from the Fashion and Textile Museum London, Dennis Notdruft, who co-curated this exhibition with the authors of the Conran and Quant book, Geoffrey Rayner and Richard Chamberlain. So Dennis will be joining us tomorrow at 5 p.m. and you can still book tickets online for that. But in the meantime, a quick talk from me about mid-century textiles. I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes or so expanding on one of the themes of the exhibition, which is mid-century textiles. The exhibition also features fashion and furniture from the era, specifically around the work of Conran and Quant. But it's nice to be able to use this time to expand out a little bit from the textiles in the show to look more at the textile designs of the era, and specifically really to look at print textiles from the era. I think as a tapestry studio, many of you will expect maybe us to concentrate a bit on weaving or on textile designers like Tibor Reich or Bernat Klein, but it's quite interesting to use this show as a launchpad for looking at print textiles from this era, and particularly because those designs have got quite an influence across into tapestry design of the era as well. So the textile design in the exhibition focuses on the designs of Terence Conran and his teachers and influences, but looking at other designers and leading lights of this era, it's good to look across and see the other work being created in textile. So this is a piece by Lucien Day. I guess it's someone who should be considered a leading light of textile design in this time period. By this time period, I'm very specifically focusing on the early 1950s. And this design, Perpetua, characterizes, I think, many of the distinctive features of mid-century textile design, namely wide open areas of background color, often the blank cloth itself, and then a very limited palette of blank flat areas of color interspersed with sort of sketchy, drawn, thin line work. So this piece, this design has, I think, only 4 other colors other than black and white. And it has this very distinctive linear drawing mark making. It looks a little bit like doodling, but actually I think it takes a great deal of time to get the right balance of harmony and complexity in this kind of textile design. Along with Lucien Day, Robert Stewart, a Scottish designer based most of his life in Glasgow and taught at Glasgow School of Art, and also quite closely linked with Dovecot's history. Stewart was quite a polymath, like many of these designers were, but he did focus specifically on print textile design as his driving force. This image is of a modern cushion made from a reprinting of one of Stewart's classic designs. The reason, or one of the reasons for the popularity of this kind of block color printing is that a lot of the designers in this era used screen printing techniques, and the quickness of screen printing techniques when they are applied to this kind of design, making these designs quite affordable and quite accessible. Robert Stewart designed and made quite a lot still by hand. He sold through Liberty, whereas Lucien Day sold often through Heels, and Heels did a lot more large-scale print runs than the hand printing of Stewart. Other Glasgow names, Sylvia Chalmers. She has produced a number of textile designs, many of which are still in the archive of Glasgow School of Art. Mary White's coppice, again, this is another example of that flat block printing of very few colours in a limited colour palette, and then sketched, drawn designs associated with it. And Jacqueline Grogue, she's another very key figure of this period of textile print design. She was an established designer before the war, but created some classic mid-century prints, including this one, which is called Pebbles. There are many other designers I could have run through, but I just choose these as specific examples of this style and era of textile design. All very distinctive of their time and feel like quite a radical departure from floral and complex, exuberant designs of the earliest 20th century and late 19th century. I've just picked this one out. This isn't actually a upholstery design like most of the prints that I've shown you already. It's a dress fabric, but at the same time, it sort of exemplifies that floral fussiness that a lot of these mid-century designers were finding an alternative to. So I think you can trace back. It's not like this design style comes from nowhere. You can trace it back to the early 20th century, and there are a number of different influences you could associate it with. I mean, it's quite dangerous to go all the way back and sort of say this has definitely come from that. It's quite it's not helpful necessarily to be too linear about it. But if you look back at the 20s designs of the Bauhaus, you've got flat areas of color, a limited palette, big open space, cleanness of line, all of which go into building this milieu from which the mid-century designers stem. The world of art also needs to be looked at. It's in the early 20th century, straight lines and quick drawings and a kind of pared back aesthetic that is very the materials and the colors and the materials and the ground used for these drawings by Picasso, and Picasso I think is very key to this, is sort of comes through and then becomes a very influential aesthetic going forward. And then I think this one's quite an interesting comparison. This is the work of Ashley Hivenden, who's better known really as a designer of a lot of the 1920s advertising that's very Art Deco. I'm sure you can search his work later if you're not aware of it, but he also did a number of abstract art pieces, even though his most well-known work is in graphic design and advertising. And this piece is actually in the Scottish National Gallery, it's currently on display up there, and it's quite interesting to again trace these clean lines, flat colour and sparse design through into the mid-century. However, I think there's a marked difference between these examples from the early 20th century, the 1920s and 1930s, and the mid-century. And I think that's something that's best characterized as popular mood. I think Bauhaus, Picasso, early 20th century art is all very much in the 1920s and 30s still part of the avant-garde, still very much about being a bohemian radical rather than necessarily part of the mainstream. And I think the big change in the mid-century period, exemplified particularly by Conran and the works that we have on show in this exhibition, is that modernity post-war becomes embraced in a way that has not been in the past. People did not want to dwell on the past in the late 1940s. The past had been pretty horrific, and the future started to look optimistic. Which does bring us to Conran, who began in textile design, and we have a number of great examples of his work in early textile design, including a student piece of his in this exhibition. And he captured that popular mood and built on it as an entrepreneur, as a furniture designer, and in all fields of his work. This piece, Checkers, is very well known. It also was used as a print for ceramic. So the fact that you could reflect across from textiles into ceramic was always quite a key feature of this period. And it still has that limited palette, flat print. The textile is visible through the print and is part of feature of the design. This popular mood, there were a couple of exhibitions that really kind of exemplified it, particularly emphasizing textiles in the textiles of interiors. So one of which is the Britain Can Make It show at the V&A, which is completely a fascinating project that was built in the V&A when the galleries had been emptied because the collection was removed from London to protect it from the Blitz. And while the galleries were still empty, Britain Can Make It was put in there, which was a exhibition of all kinds of modern, forward-thinking, young, fresh design from British designers wanting to establish themselves post-war. And the most popular area in this exhibition was their interiors section, which were a series of home settings and the textile designs that were featured in that became incredibly popular. And of course, much more famous still is the Festival of Britain in 1952, for which London's South Bank was built, and both the Conran Chequers print and Jacqueline Grove prints were created for this exhibition. So 1951, it says it on the poster, not 1952. Just a little side step out of print textiles, because I mentioned I thought it had a greater affinity with tapestry because of the imagery in it than necessarily woven design textiles of this era. To a key tapestry of the time, commissioned in 1952, completed in 1962, designed by Graham Sutherland for the Basil Spence designed Coventry Cathedral. It's not a dovecot tapestry, but it's something I've always loved and admired. It was actually commissioned eventually from weavers in Aubusson after Dovecot had discussed the design with Sutherland. Sutherland wanted it to be woven as an entire piece of cloth and not to be several pieces of cloth tied together. I think that purity was something that was quite important to him. Dovecot had recommended against this because it would be a challenge to keep that cloth stable, and actually that's proved to be the case because they have had to do a recent restoration project on this to stop the sort of sagging that you can see in this photograph. But as a piece of tapestry that exemplifies the ambition, the popularity, and the forward-thinking nature of textiles of the time, I think it's something that sort of gives you a bigger picture of the mood of the 1950s in textile. So coming back to our exhibition, we do trace some of the roots of the textile design of this period back to the wonderful artist Paolozzi and his textile designs. He's again another polymath and very closely links the world of art with the world of pop culture and accessible design. So it's my favourite part of the exhibition, this section on Paolozzi, that also features the work of Piero Fornasetti, who also has quite an influential impact on designers such as Conran and Quant, and also in particular Laura Ashley. And I said, talk about the popular mood. I think Conran really takes that forward, and in the 1960s, as the world turns to pop, the establishment of Habitat in 1964 really cements modern living and modern textile design in people's everyday lives. I mentioned Laura Ashley. There's a big feature of our exhibition is our Laura Ashley display, and I think it's quite striking how unlike what we might associate with Laura Ashley these early pieces are, and I think that potentially is another very interesting subject for another one of these mid-century musings talks, so look out for that. I think we'll put that on at some point soon. So that gives you a brief introduction to mid-century textiles. This is the Mid-Century Modern exhibition. It's on at Dovecot just now, and do come along if you can get to Edinburgh safely. And thank you so much.